Hi, everyone. This is Paula Harvey of Tejon Ranch Conservancy. We're going to talk about some tools that you can use in drawing. So we'll get started with our PowerPoint. So in this series of lessons, there are 7 lessons in all. What we're going to do are some basic drawing exercises. So these are not necessarily things that are going to help you with your nature journaling specifically, but are going to help you just develop little stronger skills in drawing, mostly that hand-eye coordination, so that what you see is actually what you end up drawing. We're going to start with a series of lessons. All of these are going to be shown, but we're also recording each of these lessons individually so that you can look at each one and practice. Or in this case, with all of them being presented at the same time, you can choose to do several lessons in one sitting. So the first thing I want you to do is think about these exercises as just warm-ups as opposed to ways to draw. As you get better in doing any kind of sports, for example, with more practice and a lot of repetition, it's the same way with drawing. The more you draw, the better you get. And in our last lesson about the 10 different steps that you take when you are doing journaling, the very last step is to draw some more. That's the 10th step. So the more you draw, the better you are at it. The first of the 7 lessons that we're going to be practicing is the one that I'm presenting here right now that builds eye-hand coordination. What you're going to be doing is training your fingers to do what you see in your mind. And that's the foundation of good drawing. The more pencil miles that you put into it, the more you train your fingers to respond to what you see. Little bits of secrets and skills and tools that artists use are what we're going to give you. And in doing so, it's going to make you have an easier time drawing what you want to see. And you won't be thinking about the process of doing it, but actually doing it, because it will become part of your drawing nature. So we can practice drawing simple steps, some geometric shapes, for example, and learn to fill in those areas with solid or graded tones and making light and bold lines. So not only are we going to be controlling our pencil in terms of what we put down on the paper, but what is the intensity of what we're putting on that paper to give that drawing some depth. These are important steps to any artist's ability to draw or any scientist's ability to draw. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about are the different ways that you can use your body in drawing. So the first one that I want you to try is to position your elbow firmly on the table and then pivot your hand from that elbow. And then the pencil will go into these arcs, these semicircles, to create something that's smooth and straight. So without moving that elbow position, you return your pencil to that start and repeat that motion a few millimeters different. The next one will be wrist arcs. It's kind of the same thing. You place your entire arm on the paper this time, and then you move your wrist and nothing else. So you are to experiment with moving just your wrist at different speeds and different pressures. And you want to do this until you can create sets of parallel lines with easy, fluid strokes. And then there's the finger arcs. With your hand resting on that paper, you're going to try just moving your fingers and pulling toward yourself. The last one are shoulder lines. In this one, you're going to relax your shoulder, move your arm and hand as a unit. So your arm, your elbow, your wrist, those are all locked into place, but now you're moving that shoulder. And in doing so, you're going to make smooth, curved lines. So rather than something that is sharp and jagged like this, you're going to have something that's smooth and rounded because all you're doing is using your shoulder as a pivot. As you're drawing, keep your eye on where you want the line to stop. Where are you going? So don't look exactly at where you are right now, but where is it you're trying to get to? And try to make those lines as straight as possible. Create a variety of curved lines, and they're all drawn from your shoulder. Parallel lines can be a challenge to draw from the shoulder because your arm's not rotating at a fixed point, as it would be if you're using your elbow that's locked on paper. So you might want to save the elbow arcs for those parallel lines. So here's what you're going to do in practice number 1. Using 2 facing pages of your journal, I want you to practice making elbow arcs, wrist arcs, finger arcs, and shoulder lines, just like you see them on this paper. Notice those finger arcs in the middle are quite short. The wrist arcs are going to be longer. The elbow arcs are going to be even longer. And then, of course, those shoulder lines are going to be the longest. So go ahead and do those and have fun. Now we're going to do lesson 2, practice number 2. And in this one, you're going to be drawing geometrical patterns. So this is in 2 steps. So let's just introduce it right now. Doodling is great practice. You can fill a page with random geometrical patterns. So you could be watching television or listening to music, and at the same time you're doing that, you're just making these geometric shapes on paper. Make some dark lines, light lines, thick lines, and thin lines. What you're really focusing on now is the quality of the lines that you're making. Make variable lines. Make circles and squares, triangles, straight lines that are long, smooth curves. Remember, that's the shoulder arc, elbow and finger arcs. Now practice these drawing shapes, focusing on moving only your shoulder, then only your elbow, only your wrist, and then only your finger, as you did in practice number 1. And when you've drawn all those lines and all those geometrical shapes, go back and label them as finger, wrist, elbow, and shoulder drawing, and make sure you have lots of each of those. So when you do, you may end up with something that looks a little like this. Now, this is just one person's idea of what we're talking about, and certainly yours is not going to look anything like that. And that's what's nice about this. This is all individual, and remember, this is a practice. So this isn't something you're going to show to anybody. But notice in here, there are some darker lines and there are lighter lines in here. These were very light right over here. There's some thicker lines, the ones that are used in some cases as arrows. Here's a circle. Those are thicker lines. You'll see there's circles and squares and triangles, long lines. This is a shoulder line right here, going right down the middle of that page. Smooth curves, elbow and finger arcs. And notice that every one of these, every one, even these, they're all labeled. So again, this is about becoming really conscious of using the different parts of your shoulder, elbow, wrist, and fingers to make different kinds of shapes. Look at this small one here. These are all finger. Very small, fine-tuned. And then this whole big box right around here that is used to frame this, that's all a shoulder line. Again, make lots of them. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you're going to do is step 2. And in step 2, now you're going to use some color and you're going to create some tone, some grading, and some texture. We're going to talk about what each of those things are. So you're going to fill in some of those spaces with even continuous tone so that it's just very smooth and an even quality of color. Or a graded tone where perhaps it's a little lighter on one part and a little darker on the other. And as an example, this PowerPoint page in itself is graded tone. Notice it's much lighter color down here in the bottom and darker up here in the top. So that's what tone is, darker or lighter. And you're going to go, when you're doing this, from a rich dark and to as light a value as you possibly can make. Then you want to create some texture. And in doing that, you're going to fill boxes with your hatched lines and cross hatching. You want to invent textures. Think about, how do you make a hairy surface or a bumpy surface, pitted surface, a pebbled surface, dried cracks? You want to add those kinds of things into these spaces because, again, what you're just doing is practicing some of these techniques and you're experimenting with it. See what you can come up with. But in doing this, use only one color. Don't use more than one. You're not going to be using a variety of different colors to create these tones and grading. You're going to use one color and the different pressures that you use with your hand to create this different effect. Now, with this training, you're going to be able to draw those smooth lines, smooth curves, straight lines, circles, sets of parallel lines. All of those things are great for drawing plants and animals. And so here you have the original drawing of these geometrical shapes using the different parts of the body to create them. And here you've got, here it's graded. Notice it's lighter here than darker there. Here's some texture here, some cracking over here. All of these different thick lines, thin lines, dark, cross hatching, light, speckled, all of those kinds of different sorts of things to create texture and intensity and interest in your drawing. So go ahead and create your geometrical page and then color it in to include texture and tone. In the third exercise, we're going to not even be using paper this time. Now we're just going to be using the air. So what you want to do, you've got to train your eye to see different angles and changes in the contour or the outline of what you're drawing. And the goal here is to draw the shape that you have in front of you rather than the one that you think you have in front of you. This is about observation. And I keep repeating the same thing, that the most important part of any drawing is observation. So in this particular case, you want to select something that you can hold in your hand and touch and feel and study. So here I've taken a cow skull. And what you're going to do is whatever it is you're studying, hold it in your hand, place it in front of you and really look at it. Now close one eye so that it becomes a little more one-dimensional instead of three-dimensional, and just trace the edges of whatever it is that you have in your hand. You're just creating a sense of what the contour is of that subject. This is again called finger tracing. And as you trace those edges, talk out loud. It needs to come out of your mouth, not thinking, but talking out loud about the angles each time your finger changes direction. So for example, you'd go, so straight down, sharp right to the turn, a short flat edge, starting to curve down, a little bump, now straight out at an angle. So you're actually giving your finger pencil directions about where to go. Now, the next thing you're going to do is do it do an air drawing, you're going to do it with a pencil in your hand, but you're not doing it with paper. This time, trace that shape in the air. This is air drawing. You're still holding that object, but now you're going to use that pencil and just with the tip of that pencil, imagine the line that would be drawn to draw the contour. Each micro change, each tiny little change of pencil direction, or each line segment length, that's a decision that you're making in your brain. And you want to notice each decision as you're moving around that object. So you're not putting it on paper. Watch that pencil and see how it goes. Sometimes what we notice is we overdo it when we're trying to make a shape. We take a look, for example, maybe at this eye socket, and maybe we make it far too big. And that's not a surprise. That's, again, something about training your eye to see what's really there and then translating that in your hand. Okay, practice number 4. This is really important. You're now going to work on drawing lightly. This is not an easy task. It's something we have to learn to do. Again, sometimes we're drawing and overdoing what it is that we're seeing. We see something that's particularly interesting and we really want to accent that. We draw too hard. So here we're going to work on drawing lightly. It's an important skill. And it needs a little practice to get there. So you're going to be wanting to use this skill over and over again while you're doing observational drawing. Remember in the first drawing lesson, we talked about drawing lightly first and not using an eraser. And then erasing in like step 4, step 5, way into the drawing process. Well, here is a practice in just drawing as lightly as you possibly can so that you can start drawing lightly, not having to use an eraser, which will burnish your paper, but will actually set out that initial amount of information that will help you to build upon it. All right, so we're going to use one journal page and get started. So first thing, loosen up, relax those shoulders, the arms and the hands, and then draw a circle on your paper. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, loosen up on that pencil grip. Make that pencil grip nice and soft and fluid, and move that pencil grip back just a little bit. So take that pencil and where you're holding it, hold it back. And then when you draw, move your whole arm, not just the fingers. Now, again, use that pencil, that shoulder drawing or that elbow drawing. Move that whole arm and then draw another circle and then another. So just draw a series of circles. Keep relaxed. Focus on being relaxed. Focus on a looser hold on your pencil. Now that you've drawn those circles, let's lighten them up. Draw a circle as lightly as you possibly can. And then see if you can draw another one even lighter than the one that you drew, as lightly as you possibly could. Fill in the whole page with the lightest circles you possibly can. And speed it up. Keep the lines loose, keep them light, and this time the goal is to make them as fast as you possibly can. Again, it's not to get tight, but to do it fast and smoothly and flexibly. Make a series of overlapping circles, scribbles, and flow lines. Practice number 5 is contour drawing. We're going to be going back to that skull idea that we did with air drawing, where you're actually going to be drawing the outline or the contour of what it is you're looking at. So contour drawing is a way to train yourself to look at drawing different shapes. The most important part of accurate drawing is to look at it carefully. Again, I keep saying this, observation is the most important part of drawing. Sometimes we look at it very quickly and then we have a mental image in our head about what it looks like. And we think we know what it's supposed to look like instead of actual observation. And since the whole goal of all of these drawing lessons is to help you become a better journaler, not a better artist, but a better journaler, and that means improving your observation skills, this is something that's really important. Observing enough so that when we start drawing, we're drawing what we actually see, not what we imagine. So contour drawing is the most powerful way to train yourself to look at a subject. So the first part of contour drawing is going to be a fun and kind of funny process. It's called blind contour drawing. And the point of blind contour drawing is not to draw, but to see. It's fun. It's going to train that connection between your eye and your pencil. So choose an interesting object. Again, like I did before with that skull, that would have been a fun object to contour draw. And then stare at that object and slowly begin to draw its shape, but do not look at the paper that you're drawing on. Instead, let your eye crawl along the contour of what you're looking at while your pencil is crawling on the paper, trying to do what the eye is actually seeing. And let your pencil go nice and slowly up and down, around. Remember all those twists and turns. That's what that previous lesson was about really talking out what you actually see. Follow those curves and angles that you see, and don't ever look at your paper, not once. With every change of that angle, let your pencil respond with its own change of direction. Another thing, don't pick up your pencil. Keep it down. It's going to be one long, continuous line. Don't pick up your pencil. And notice at the very bottom of this PowerPoint, in bold, it says, take your time. Do this really slowly. So here's a picture of a blind contour of a skull. It doesn't look like that, but what it's all about was this whole single line. And all of these movements had to do with that. And all of these lines, they went out, but they came back. It's one line. When you're done, take a look. The results might be funny. It might be really interesting. It might be a really cool abstract art piece. But look for those places where your lines reveal small, subtle changes or aspects of that real object. In this particular case, look at that. I bet you guys know those are teeth, right? This is probably the jaw. How does this look similar to the actual object? What parts are right? What parts are wrong? What parts are just small little changes that were correct, that weren't big changes that you made on your paper? You can continue practicing with other objects. The more of this that you do, the better you get at having your hand connect with your eye as you're watching that object. And so the next one's called a modified contour drawing. Now, in a modified contour drawing, we're going to perfect those observations, but those results are going to look much more like the object. And there's a couple reasons why that's going to be the case. Process is almost the same, only this time you get to look at what you're doing. Every now and then, glance down at your paper and allow yourself to relate those spaces and the size and the proportions of those lines with each other. And the other thing that you can do in this case, in modified contour drawing, you can pick up that pencil and move it to another spot. So it's not one continuous contour line. Unless you want to do it that way, that's fine. But in this case, you get to look and you get to pick the pencil up. But keep those eyes of yours on the object you're drawing. Again, this is about observation. So here's that same artist drawing that same skull, and this time it's a modified contour drawing. There's several different lines here. It's much more in proportion. All the parts seem to be in the right place, and that was the purpose. Our next practice is going to be looking at negative shapes rather than those positive shapes. So it's those darker spots, the holes and things. So negative shapes are those shapes that occur between an object set that we're drawing. In approaching a subject such as a skull, for example, you'd probably focus on the shape of the upper and lower jaws. But the negative shapes in the shape are the empty spaces between the upper and lower jaws. The jaws have height, width, angles, and so does negative space. By drawing the negative space as an actual shape, you're going to be improving your drawing because you're going to be using those negative shapes as places that help you know exactly where to place those other parts. Is it too far apart? Is it too large? Is it too long? Those negative shapes are equally important to the positive shapes in creating an accurate, well-observed subject. So I love this drawing because this really shows an example of the power of negative and positive shapes. Which one is negative? Which one's positive? Just because it's white doesn't make it the positive shape, does it? Maybe not with the black cat. But again, all those proportions are interrelated, the positive and the negative shapes. If your negative space doesn't fit, don't ignore it and move on. You need to fix it right then and there. And again, we just did an exercise on drawing extremely lightly and then lighter still. So as you start doing these drawings, you want to do them as lightly as possible because that's where you can make your corrections without ever needing to use an eraser or starting out at all. So you'll have to find a valuable indication that something is off in your proportions as you're doing these negative spaces, and then you fix them before they become something that makes an inaccurate picture. Same artist, same skull. Now what we're looking at are the negative shapes. Notice that they've been filled in. So we're not looking at the positive shapes here. We're not looking at the white stuff. We're looking at these dark shapes. Those are the things that help to put everything into proportion. So use the object that you would use for your contour drawing again, sketch it again, and this time pay equal attention to the positive and the negative shapes. Our last exercise is gesture drawing. Gesture drawing is going to be a little bit different. Again, we're going to be using that same skull. But here's something that's really fun to practice. What I want you to do right now is just on a plain piece of paper, draw a circle. Really fast, just draw a circle. Is it perfect? With one simple line. Did you make a perfect circle? No, it's going to be lopsided. Drawing a circle this way is really, really hard. But there's a way to create an almost perfect circle without using a compass. So let's try this easier way. Lightly and loosely draw another circle. And it's okay if it's a little lopsided. And now, without erasing, draw over it, correcting some of those imperfections with continued light lines. Remember, really light lines that you had practiced earlier. Overlap 5 or more circles, slowly correcting the roundness of it. Your brain is going to automatically go toward that right shape, the correct shape. And as it does, you can press a little harder, reinforcing the lines that you want to keep. And watch a perfect circle emerge from that original lopsided circle. So you're starting out very light, and as you make those corrections, you can start getting a little darker still, until you've got a perfect circle. So notice here, this artist started with a lopsided circle right here in the top, and then added some extra lines here and there to correct some of those lopsidedness. See that right over here? Notice this? Look here. It's right here. It's the same circle, but notice that he actually made this a little different shape than what was already here until finally comes up with an almost perfect circle. So the beginning is to be very, very light. Make lots of lines and then reinforce those that seem to be the most accurate. But by keeping it light, you're going to let your brain sort out between what is right and what is wrong. Is it possible to do it this way? Is it possible to do it that way? When I look at this one right here, I know I'm going to have to make a correction right over here. You'll do that as you slowly become a little more bold and make little harder lines. And this is what you're going to be doing whenever you're making any object, whether it is a circle or a skull or the line of a leaf. You start with an initial light line and then go back over it to make a more accurate line. So notice here that in this particular case, there's lots and lots of lines that are being used until the shape is correct. Look how he started out with these lines over here, and then he made it more defined. But even within those definitions, he made more definitions. So you'll see that those bold lines are the final lines that actually define what it's supposed to be looking like, what is correct. Lots of these unimportant lines, none of which have to be erased. They were just part of the process until you got to the point where you were making something accurate. And that is it. Those are the 7 different exercises that you can do all in one sitting, or you can do one at a time, and practice those while you're journaling. Try and remember every one of those skills that you're developing as you go through this process. It was great to do these. I hope that you had fun. Just remember, this is not about learning how to be an artist. This is learning how to be a better journaler and having a few tools in your tool belt that will help you to have an easier time drawing what you're actually seeing. So until next time, we'll see you later. Bye for now.